Mark Thompson had always considered himself a reasonable person. As a professional architectural photographer, he prided himself on his attention to detail and ability to find beauty in the ordinary. His home in Oakwood Estates reflected this. Sensibility, a carefully restored 1960s ranch house with clean lines and thoughtful landscaping. The property was his sanctuary, at least until the morning he found a 38-foot Winnebago Horizon parked across his driveway. It wasn't just any RV. The gleaming white behemoth belonged to Karen Wilson, the recently elected president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. The same Karen Wilson who had spent the last 3 months sending him increasingly aggressive notices about his non-compliant landscaping choices. The same Karen Wilson who now sat in an expensive camping chair beside her RV, typing furiously on her iPad while occasionally glancing at Mark's house with an expression of smug satisfaction. Mark had just returned from an early morning shoot at a new sustainable housing development when he discovered his driveway blocked. His first instinct was to call the police, but he knew Karen well enough to realize this was exactly what she wanted, an excuse to play the victim and rally the HOA board against him. "Beautiful morning, isn't it, Mr. Thompson?" Karen's voice carried across his lawn, dripping with artificial pleasantry. She adjusted her designer sunglasses and smoothed her perfectly styled bob, the picture of suburban authority. "I thought we could have a chat about your continued violations of community standards." Mark took a deep breath, counting to 10 before responding. "Karen, you're blocking my driveway. This is private property and you're trespassing." "Oh, I don't think so." She held up a thick binder emblazoned with the HOA logo. "According to Bylaw 15.7, the board has the right to conduct compliance inspections at any time. And since you've ignored our previous notices, well," she gestured to the RV, "I'm conducting an extended inspection." The absurdity of the situation would have been comical if it weren't so infuriating. Mark had spent 2 years meticulously planning and executing his yard's transformation. Every plant was chosen for its drought resistance and environmental impact. The natural rock garden that Karen claimed violated HOA standards had actually won an award from the local environmental society. But none of that mattered to Karen, who seemed determined to remake the neighborhood in her own beige cookie-cutter image. "You can't just park an RV here indefinitely," Mark said, already pulling out his phone to document the situation. "I have clients coming later today." Karen's smile widened. "Well, there are 2 ways this can go. Either you can agree to remove all non-approved landscaping elements and replant with our approved species list." She paused, reaching for a stack of papers on her portable table. "Or you can try to have me towed. But I should warn you, any action against an HOA board member conducting official business could result in significant fines. Section 23(4) is very clear about that." As Mark stood there, processing the sheer audacity of the situation, he noticed movement across the street. His neighbor, Rick Davis, was walking his dog, deliberately slow, taking in the scene. Rick caught Mark's eye and gave an almost imperceptible head shake before pulling out his phone and appearing to take a photo of the morning sky. Mark had never spoken much with Rick beyond casual greetings, but something about that small gesture gave him hope. "I have all the required approvals for my landscaping," Mark said, keeping his voice steady. "Everything was submitted and signed off on before installation." "Ah, yes." Karen tapped her iPad. "Those approvals were granted under the previous board. Unfortunately, we've discovered some irregularities in the approval process. All recent landscaping modifications are under review." That's when Mark noticed something that made his photographer's eye twitch. A logo on one of the papers in Karen's stack. Elite Property Management, the company that had mysteriously won the HOA's maintenance contract shortly after Karen's election. The same company that, according to neighborhood gossip, was run by Karen's brother-in-law. Cars began slowing as they passed, neighbors gawking at the spectacle. Some quickly looked away when Mark caught their eye, but others held his gaze, their expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity. One woman even stopped her car completely, rolling down her window as if to say something. But Karen's sharp glance sent her driving on. Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from an unknown number. Karen pulled this same stunt in Riverside Meadows before moving here. Called Jennifer Martinez. She handled those cases. Don't let Karen know you know. Looking up, Mark saw Rick Davis giving him a subtle thumbs up before disappearing into his house. The plot was thickening, and Mark's initial anger was being replaced by something else: determination. If Karen thought she could intimidate him into submission, she had seriously miscalculated. I'll need to see the specific bylaw that authorizes this. Inspection, Mark said, choosing his words carefully. And I'll need it in writing. Karen's smile faltered slightly. Everything will be properly documented in the official notice, which you'll receive within the statutory period. So you're conducting an inspection without proper documentation? Mark pressed, noting how Karen's perfectly manicured nails dug into her iPad case. I'm sure we can resolve this amicably, Karen said, her voice losing some of its sweetness. The board has recommended several excellent landscaping companies that can bring your property into compliance. I can even fast-track the approval process if you're willing to be cooperative. The implication was clear. Use her preferred contractors or face endless harassment. Mark had heard rumors about Karen's connections to local businesses, how certain companies always seemed to win HOA contracts while others were mysteriously disqualified. But hearing her make the suggestion so brazenly while literally blocking his driveway with her RV was stunning. Mark's phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Check your HOA agreement. They added new inspection clauses during the last meeting. Not properly ratified. Jennifer will know what to do. Looking at Karen's smug expression, Mark made a decision. He wouldn't be bullied. Not by Karen, not by her board, not by anyone. His home, his sanctuary was worth fighting for. And something told him this fight was about more than just his landscaping. It was about standing up to the kind of petty tyranny that thrived in places like Oakwood Estates. I'll be documenting everything about this situation, Mark said, holding up his phone. Every minute you're parked here, every interaction, every detail. Document away, Karen replied, settling back in her chair. I have nothing to hide. I'm simply protecting our community's standards and property values. But Mark caught it. The slight tightening around her eyes, the way her fingers clenched her iPad just a bit harder. Karen Wilson might act untouchable, but she wasn't invincible. And Mark was beginning to suspect he wasn't the first person she'd tried to intimidate. As he walked back into his house, Mark could feel Karen's eyes on him. She thought she had him cornered, thought her RV and her bylaws and her threats would force him to submit. But she had made a crucial mistake. She had given him time to think, to plan, to gather allies. Mark looked up Jennifer Martinez's number and took a deep breath. The next call he made would set in motion a chain of events that would shake Oakwood Estates to its foundations. Karen Wilson had chosen the wrong driveway to park her RV on and the wrong homeowner to intimidate. As he dialed, Mark watched through his window as Karen began unpacking what appeared to be a full day's worth of supplies. She was settling in for a long siege, but what she didn't realize was that her act of aggression would ultimately lead to her own undoing. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered. Jennifer Martinez speaking. Ms. Martinez, my name is Mark Thompson. I live in Oakwood Estates, and I have a situation with our HOA president that you might find interesting. There was a pause on the line, then a small chuckle. Let me guess, Karen Wilson's involved? How did you know? Mr. Thompson, you're not the first person to call me about Karen Wilson. But if she's pulled what I think she has, you might be the last. Tell me everything, and don't leave out any details. As Mark began recounting the morning's events, he noticed more neighbors gathering at the edges of his property, watching the scene unfold. Some were taking photos, others talking in hushed voices. Karen waved to them cheerfully, playing her role as the dutiful HOA president protecting property values. But something had changed. The fear that usually kept people in line was being replaced by curiosity, by anger, by a desire for change. "Send me photos of everything," Jennifer said after listening to his story. "And Mark, don't move that RV. Not yet. Karen's just given us exactly what we need." As Mark hung up the phone with Jennifer Martinez, the morning sun cast long shadows across his front yard. The massive RV still dominated his driveway like an oversized monument to HOA overreach. But something had shifted in the atmosphere. Karen Wilson's smug expression had morphed into something more guarded as she noticed the growing number of neighbors gathering at the edges of Mark's property.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Linda Chen, who lived 3 doors down, emerged from her house clutching her morning coffee. Instead of hurrying past like most neighbors had done earlier, she walked deliberately to the edge of Mark's lawn. Her presence seemed to irritate Karen, who shifted uncomfortably in her expensive camping chair. "Quite a show you're putting on, Karen," Linda called out, her voice carrying across the morning air. "Is this what you meant by improving community standards during your election speech?" Karen's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her iPad. "This is an official HOA inspection, Linda. I'm simply doing my duty as board president. By parking an RV on someone's private property," Linda's skepticism was clear. Interesting interpretation of duty. More neighbors began to emerge, forming small clusters along the sidewalk. The morning commute had slowed to a crawl as passing cars lingered to observe the spectacle. Karen maintained her composed facade, but Mark noticed how she kept glancing at her phone, perhaps expecting reinforcement that wasn't coming. Inside his house, Mark's own phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer Martinez. "Don't engage directly. Document everything. I'm filing emergency injunction papers now. And Mark, check your mailbox. There's something you need to see." Making sure Karen was watching, Mark walked casually to his mailbox. Inside, he found what looked like an ordinary community newsletter, but paperclipped to it was a note. Karen did this before. Riverside Meadows HOA records, case number 2847, public. Document. As he walked back toward his house, Mark noticed Steve Anderson, a former board member, had joined the growing crowd. Steve stood slightly apart from the others, his expression troubled as he watched Karen's display of authority. Their eyes met briefly, and Steve gave an almost imperceptible nod before turning away. The morning wore on, and Karen's inspection began to take on a circus-like atmosphere. She had set up a small folding table beside her chair, spreading out various HOA documents and regulations like a general plotting a campaign. Every so often, she would make a show of photographing Mark's yard, paying particular attention to his award-winning native plant garden. Around 10 o'clock, a sleek black Tesla pulled up across the street. Jennifer Martinez stepped out, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to Karen's increasingly theatrical performance. She didn't acknowledge Karen or the RV, instead walking directly to Mark's front door with a briefcase in hand. "Don't react to anything I'm about to tell you," Jennifer said quietly once they were inside. "But Karen's done this before, and she's made a crucial mistake. Those new inspection clauses she's citing, they weren't properly ratified. More importantly, we've found a pattern of similar incidents at her previous HOA." Mark listened intently as Jennifer laid out what she had discovered. Karen's history of HOA involvement was a trail of controversial decisions, mysterious contractor selections, and questionable enforcement actions. At Riverside Meadows, she had orchestrated a similar campaign of selective enforcement, targeting homeowners who refused to use her preferred contractors for renovations. The RV stunt is new, Jennifer admitted, but the pattern is the same. She finds a pretext to pressure homeowners, then offers a solution that coincidentally benefits her connections. The difference is, this time, she's left physical evidence of her harassment. A knock at Mark's door interrupted their conversation. Through the window, they could see Rick Davis standing on the porch, holding a thick manila envelope. Jennifer nodded for Mark to let him in. "Sorry to interrupt," Rick said, glancing nervously over his shoulder at the RV spectacle. "But you need to see these." He spread several documents across Mark's kitchen counter. "I've been keeping records since Karen took over the board. Every violation notice, every contractor recommendation, every sudden rule change." The documents painted a disturbing picture. Properties that used Karen's recommended contractors mysteriously had their violations cleared, while those who chose independent companies faced endless scrutiny. Assessment fees varied wildly, with some homeowners paying significantly more than others for identical services. "Look at the dates," Jennifer said, pointing to a series of violation notices. "Each escalation coincides with a new contract award to Elite Property Management. It's not just about control, it's about money." Outside, the crowd had grown. Patricia Turner, an elderly resident who had lived in Oakwood Estates for 30 years, had brought out chairs for some of the observers. Karen's official inspection had transformed into an unintended community gathering, with neighbors sharing stories of their own encounters with the HOA board. Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Steve Anderson. "Meeting at my house tonight. 7 p.m. Bring everything you have. Others need to know." Jennifer was reviewing the documents with growing interest. "This goes beyond harassment," she said. "There's a pattern of selective enforcement, possible kickbacks, misuse of HOA funds. Karen's not just breaking HOA bylaws, she might be breaking the law." A commotion outside drew their attention. Tom Bennett, a city council member who lived in the adjacent neighborhood, had arrived. He stood at the edge of Mark's property, engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with Karen. "I've received multiple calls about this situation," they heard Tom say. "An RV parked on private property without consent raises serious legal questions, regardless of HOA bylaws." Karen's voice carried through the window, her tone less confident than before. "This is an internal HOA matter, Councilman. The city has no jurisdiction over our enforcement procedures." "Actually," Tom replied, "the city has every interest in ensuring HOAs operate within the law. Blocking access to private property could be considered false imprisonment. And these new inspection clauses you're citing, they weren't filed with the city clerk's office as required by Municipal Code 47. 3. The morning's power dynamic was shifting. Karen's phone rang several times, but she let it go to voicemail, her expression growing increasingly strained. The crowd of observers had swelled to include residents from neighboring streets, many filming the scene with their phones. Jennifer was making notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking Rick to clarify details about specific incidents. "We need to move carefully," she said. "Karen's backed herself into a corner, but cornered people can be dangerous." "Mark, do you have security cameras?" "Installed them last month," Mark replied, "after the third surprise inspection of my yard." "Good. We'll need that footage. And Rick, these records are crucial. Would you be willing to testify if necessary?" Rick nodded without hesitation. "All of us would. We're tired of living under Karen's thumb." A new figure approached Karen's command center. David Miller, another board member. He spoke to her in hushed tones, gesturing emphatically. Karen's face reddened as she listened, her composed facade cracking slightly. "David's having second thoughts," Rick explained. "He contacted me last week about some irregularities in the contractor bidding process, said things weren't adding up." Jennifer's smile was subtle but satisfied. "The house of cards is starting to collapse. Karen's mistake wasn't parking her RV here. It was assuming everyone would stay quiet out of fear." Mark watched as more neighbors arrived, some bringing chairs and umbrellas, turning Karen's attempt at intimidation into an impromptu block party. Linda Chen had set up a coffee station on her front lawn, serving cups to the growing crowd. The sense of community was palpable, as if a spell of fear had been broken. "We should go outside," Jennifer suggested. "Let Karen see that her tactics aren't working, but remember, don't engage directly. Let her make the next mistake." As they stepped onto the front porch, Karen's voice carried across the lawn, tinged with desperation. "This is an official HOA inspection. Anyone interfering could face fines under Section 23(4) of the bylaws." "Actually," Jennifer called out, her voice clear and professional, "I have those bylaws right here. Section 23(4) doesn't exist in the properly ratified version. Would you like to explain where these new sections came from, Ms. Wilson?" The crowd murmured. Karen's face flushed deeper as she fumbled with her iPad. "The board approved amendments during our last closed session, without proper notice, without homeowner input, without filing with the city clerk." Jennifer's questions hung in the air. "That's not how bylaws work, Ms. Wilson, but you know that, don't you? Just like you knew it at Riverside Meadows?" The mention of her previous HOA made Karen flinch visibly. David Miller took a step back from her chair, his expression troubled. The crowd's whispers grew louder as phones emerged, searching for information about Karen's past. Mark noticed movement near the back of the crowd. Jack and Susan Cooper, who had recently received violation notices about their garden, were distributing copies of something. As the papers circulated, gasps and angry murmurs spread through the gathering. "Property assessments," Rick whispered, "showing how homes using elite property management paid lower fees despite similar violations." Karen's phone rang again, and this time she answered, turning away from the crowd. Her whispered conversation was intense, her free hand clenching and unclenching around her iPad. Jennifer touched Mark's arm lightly. "This is proceeding faster than I expected. Karen's support system is crumbling, but be prepared. She'll either retreat or escalate dramatically. Either way, we need to be ready." As if on cue, a large black SUV pulled up to the curb. Grace Sullivan, the HOA's attorney, emerged looking flustered. She took in the scene, the crowd, the documentation being shared, Jennifer Martinez's presence, and her expression darkened. "Karen," Grace called out, her voice sharp, "a word, please." But before Karen could respond, another voice cut through the morning air. "I have something to say." Steve Anderson stepped forward, his former board member status lending weight to his presence. "There's more to this story, and it's time everyone knew the truth." The crowd fell silent, all eyes turning to Steve. Karen half rose from her chair, her face a mask of panic. "Steve, remember your non-disclosure agreement. An NDA can't cover up illegal activities." Jennifer interjected smoothly. "Please continue, Mr. Anderson." Steve cleared his throat, looking directly at Karen. "It started 6 months ago when Karen first proposed the new maintenance contracts. The truth was about to come out, and everyone present could feel it. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting harsh light on Karen's impromptu inspection station. Her RV, meant to be a symbol of authority, now looked like what it was: an expensive attempt at intimidation that had backfired spectacularly. Mark stood on his porch, Jennifer and Rick beside him, watching as his quiet stance against HOA overreach transformed into something larger. This wasn't just about his driveway anymore. It was about a community finding its voice, about neighbors standing together against abuse of power. Karen Wilson's RV still blocked his driveway, but somehow it no longer seemed like the immovable obstacle it had appeared to be that morning. The real power wasn't in Karen's bylaws or her board position. It was in the truth finally coming to light and in the community that had gathered to witness it. Steve Anderson took a deep breath, ready to reveal what he knew. The crowd leaned in, phones recording, as another chapter in this suburban showdown began to unfold. Steve Anderson stood before the gathered crowd, his normally quiet demeanor replaced by a steely resolve. The morning sun had grown intense, casting harsh shadows across Karen Wilson's impromptu command center. Her RV loomed behind them like a white elephant, a monument to overreach that had sparked an unexpected revolution in Oakwood Estates. 6 months ago, during a closed board meeting, Karen presented what she called the Community Enhancement Initiative. Steve began, his voice steady. It seemed reasonable at first. Standardized maintenance contracts, streamlined violation procedures, preferred vendor lists. But then I started noticing discrepancies in the financial reports. Grace Sullivan, the HOA's attorney, stepped forward. Mr. Anderson, I advise you to consider your legal obligations carefully. I've considered them for months, Steve replied, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. That's why I kept copies of everything, every email, every contract, every backdated approval, including the ones you thought were deleted, Grace. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Karen's perfectly maintained facade cracked further as she reached for her phone, but Jennifer Martinez's voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't make any calls right now, Ms. Wilson. Let's hear what Mr. Anderson has to say. Steve held up a thick folder. It started with the landscaping contracts. Elite Property Management wasn't just Karen's brother-in-law's company. It was created 3 weeks before the bidding process began. Their business license was approved the same day they submitted their bid. A bid that somehow came in exactly $5 under their nearest competitor. Patricia Turner, the elderly resident who had been silently observing, spoke up. That explains why my gardening service was suddenly deemed non-compliant last month. I've used the same company for 20 years. Exactly, Steve nodded. The new rules were designed to force everyone to use elite services. But it gets worse. The violation notices, the ones Karen's been issuing, they're generated by another company, Sunshine Valley Compliance LLC. Want to guess who owns that? Karen stood abruptly, her chair toppling backward. This is slander. You signed confidentiality agreements. Confidentiality doesn't cover fraud, Jennifer interjected smoothly. Please continue, Mr. Anderson. Steve pulled out more documents. Sunshine Valley Compliance is registered to Karen's college roommate. They charge the HOA $250 for every violation notice issued. Last month alone, they billed us for 127 notices. That's nearly $32,000 of homeowner fees spent on harassment. The crowd's reaction was immediate and loud. Linda Chen pushed forward. I received 3 notices last week about my rose bushes. Are you saying each one cost us $250? Plus processing fees, Steve confirmed. But here's where it gets interesting. Homes that used elite property management for their maintenance. Their violations mysteriously disappeared. No follow-up inspections, no compliance checks, just a clean slate. Tom Bennett, the city council member, had been taking notes. This goes beyond HOA misconduct. This is systematic fraud. Karen's voice rose, shrill and desperate. You can't prove any of this. These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled former board member. Actually, Steve said, I can prove all of it because Karen made one crucial mistake. She used her HOA email account to coordinate everything. Emails she thought were deleted still existed on the server backup. Emails discussing kickbacks, coordinated bidding, even plans to target specific homeowners who might cause problems. The crowd surged forward, but Jennifer raised her hand. "Please, let Mr. Anderson finish. This needs to be properly documented." Steve turned to face Karen directly. "Tell them about Riverside Meadows, Karen. Tell them how you pulled the same scheme there until the homeowners finally caught on. Tell them about the shell companies, the inflated maintenance fees, the selective enforcement. Tell them how you moved here and started over, thinking no one would connect the dots." Grace Sullivan was frantically typing on her phone, her composed legal demeanor crumbling. David Miller, the other board member, had moved away from Karen's camp entirely, now standing at the edge of the crowd with a stunned expression. The Community Enhancement Initiative wasn't about improving Oakwood Estates, Steve continued. It was about creating a network of companies that could extract money from homeowners through forced compliance and overpriced services. Karen's RV, stunt today? It's just another intimidation tactic, but she didn't expect us to fight back. She didn't expect us to compare notes and connect the dots. Mark watched from his porch as the community he'd lived in for years transformed before his eyes. Neighbors who had barely spoken were now standing together, sharing stories of their encounters with Karen's enforcement regime. The fear that had kept them isolated was evaporating in the morning sun. Linda Chen raised her hand, holding up her phone. "I've been doing some research. Karen Wilson isn't even her real name. In Riverside Meadows, she was Karen Wilkinson. Before that, at Pine Grove Estates, she was Karen Williams. Different names, same scam." The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. Karen's face had lost all color, her designer athleisure wear suddenly seeming like a costume that no longer fit. Her phone buzzed continuously, but she made no move to answer it. Jennifer Martinez stepped forward, her legal pad filled, with notes. "Miss Wilson, or whatever your real name is, I suggest you move your RV immediately. The documentation Mr. Anderson has provided, combined with your actions today, gives us more than enough to file for an emergency injunction, not to mention potential criminal charges." "You don't understand." Karen's voice had lost its authoritative edge. "This isn't what it looks like. The community needed structure, needed proper management. I was just trying to maintain standards." "By creating fake companies?" Tom Bennett asked. "By charging homeowners thousands in fraudulent fees? That's not maintaining standards, that's organized crime." The morning had grown hot, the crowd's energy shifting from shock to anger. But Jennifer maintained control of the situation. "Please, everyone, let's handle this legally and properly. Mr. Anderson's evidence needs to be submitted to the proper authorities. This isn't just about getting Karen's RV off Mark's driveway anymore. This is about protecting all homeowners from systematic fraud." Steve wasn't finished. He pulled out one last document. "There's more. The new inspection clauses Karen's been citing. They were never legally adopted. The board meeting minutes were falsified. I have the original recordings to prove it." Karen's command center was crumbling. Her perfectly arranged documents now seemed like props in an elaborate deception. The RV that had been meant to intimidate now looked like a retreat vehicle, ready to whisk her away from the consequences of her actions. Grace Sullivan finally stepped forward. "In light of these allegations, I must regrettably withdraw as HOA. Counsel, Ms. Wilson, I suggest you seek personal legal representation immediately." The community gathered on Mark's lawn had transformed from spectators to participants in a moment of collective awakening. Patricia Turner spoke up again, her voice carrying years of frustration. "All those fines I paid for my non-compliant Garden gnomes, I want my money back. We'll get to restitution, Jennifer assured her. But first, we need to preserve the evidence and file the proper legal documents. Mr. Anderson, are you willing to sign an affidavit detailing everything you've told us? Steve nodded firmly. I've been waiting months to do the right thing. I just needed to gather enough proof. Mark stepped forward for the first time since Steve's revelations began. Karen, move your RV. Your inspection show is over. The command in his voice was quiet, but unmistakable. Karen looked around, perhaps finally realizing how completely her power play had backfired. Her phone buzzed again, and this time she glanced at the screen. Whatever she saw made her face crumple. Elite Property Management just dissolved their LLC, Linda announced, reading from her phone. Looks like Karen's brother-in-law is jumping ship. The community's response was building like a wave. Jack and Susan Cooper were organizing a list of affected homeowners. Tom Bennett was on the phone with the city clerk's office. Jennifer Martinez was coordinating with her legal team to file emergency motions. Karen Wilson's carefully constructed facade had crumbled completely. She began gathering her documents with trembling hands, no longer meeting anyone's eyes. The woman who had arrived that morning radiating authority now looked small and desperate. But as she turned toward her RV, Steve spoke one last time. Wait. Show them the offshore account, Karen, the one where the real money went. The crowd fell silent. Karen froze, her back to the gathering. Even Jennifer Martinez seemed surprised by this revelation. Offshore account? Tom Bennett's voice was sharp with interest. Steve held up his USB drive. Follow the money trail. From Elite and Sunshine Valley. It doesn't stop at Karen's family members. The real profits were being funneled through a series of shell companies to an account in the Cayman Islands. An account registered to a Karen Winters, her first married name. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about HOA overreach or local fraud. This was organized, systematic theft on a scale no one had imagined. Jennifer Martinez was already on her phone. We need to contact the FBI's white-collar crime division. This just escalated beyond local jurisdiction. The morning sun had risen fully, casting harsh light on the scene. Karen's RV, which had arrived as a symbol of authority, now looked like evidence in what was becoming a federal investigation. The community of Oakwood Estates, which had awakened to one homeowner's stand against HOA intimidation, was now witness to the unraveling of a complex criminal enterprise. And it had all started because Karen Wilson had chosen the wrong driveway to park her RV on, the wrong homeowner to intimidate, and the wrong community to underestimate. The afternoon sun beat down on Oakwood Estates as federal agents pulled up in unmarked vehicles. Special Agent Sarah Collins emerged from a dark SUV, her badge glinting in the sunlight. The neighborhood's usually quiet streets were alive with activity. News vans parked at a respectful distance, neighbors gathered in small clusters, and at the center of it all, Karen Wilson's massive RV still occupied Mark Thompson's driveway. Mr. Thompson, Agent Collins approached Mark, who stood with Jennifer Martinez on his front porch. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your interactions with Ms. Wilson and the HOA board. Inside Mark's home, now serving as an impromptu command center. For the investigation, Steve Anderson spread his evidence across the dining room table. The USB drive that had sparked the morning's revelations was now being analyzed by FBI cybercrime specialists. The money trail is more complex than we initially thought, Steve explained to Agent Collins. Karen didn't just target Oakwood Estates. This was a pattern repeated across 5 different states, each time with a slightly different name and a new set of shell companies. Agent Collins nodded, taking detailed notes. We've been tracking similar schemes in residential communities across the country. The sophistication of this operation suggests a larger network, Special Agent Sarah Collins studied the sprawling evidence wall that had transformed Mark Thompson's living room into an investigative hub. Photos, documents, and financial records were connected by red strings, creating a web of deception that stretched far beyond Oakwood Estates. Her partner, Agent Michael Rodriguez, was methodically interviewing residents in the kitchen, his voice mixing with the hum of computer equipment set up by the FBI's cybercrime unit. "The pattern is remarkable," Agent Collins mused, tracing a line between photographs of Karen Wilson, or rather, the woman who had used that name. Each HOA takeover was meticulously planned, executed with precision, and abandoned before anyone could connect the dots. Jennifer Martinez nodded, adding, "Another document to the wall. She specifically targeted communities in transition, aging populations, new developments, areas with high turnover, places where people were less likely to question authority or band together." Through the window, they could see Karen's RV, still dominating Mark's driveway, now surrounded by evidence markers. Forensic technicians photographed every inch of her inspection station, documenting the elaborate facade she had constructed to intimidate homeowners. "We found something interesting," called out Agent Rodriguez, emerging from the kitchen with Linda Chen. "Miss Chen has security camera footage of late-night meetings behind the community center. Multiple vehicles, all registered to different shell companies." Linda pulled up the footage on her tablet. "I installed the cameras after my garden was vandalized, caught more than I expected." The grainy nighttime video showed Karen meeting with various individuals, exchanging documents under cover of darkness. One figure was immediately recognizable: Grace Sullivan, the HOA's former attorney, who had fled the scene earlier that morning. Grace wasn't just providing legal cover, Steve Anderson explained, joining them at the evidence wall. She was the architect of the Shell Company network. Her law firm created similar structures in every community Karen targeted. Agent Collins's phone buzzed with an update from the Financial Crimes Unit. "They've started freezing accounts. The Cayman Islands connection was just the beginning. We're seeing transfers to banks in Luxembourg, Singapore, the British Virgin Islands." Outside, the community had transformed into something Karen likely never anticipated. Instead of cowering in fear of HOA retaliation, neighbors were organizing. Jack and Susan Cooper had set up a documentation station on their front lawn, helping residents compile records of questionable fines and forced contractor usage. Patricia Turner, despite her age, had become an unlikely hero. Her meticulous record-keeping, over 30 years, provided crucial historical context. "She started small," Patricia explained to a group of agents. "First it was garden gnomes, then mailbox colors. By the time she demanded we all use elite property management, people were too afraid to question it." Mark watched from his porch as his quiet suburban street became ground zero for unraveling what appeared to be a nationwide criminal enterprise. Tom Bennett, the city council member, was coordinating with officials from other municipalities where Karen had operated. "We're seeing identical patterns in at least 12 other communities," Tom reported, spreading a map across Mark's kitchen counter. "Same progression: win HOA election, implement new rules, create vendor requirements, establish shell companies, extract funds, then vanish before anyone catches on." But Karen hadn't vanished this time. Her RV stood as a monument to hubris, her attempt to intimidate Mark having triggered the very exposure she had so carefully avoided in other communities. "The arrogance is what tripped her up," Jennifer observed, reviewing financial records with Agent Collins. "She got too comfortable, too confident." Parking that RV wasn't just about Mark's landscaping. It was a power play, a message to the entire community. Agent Rodriguez returned with more witness statements. "We've got residents reporting similar tactics dating back months. Selective, Enforcement, mysterious fines, pressure to use specific contractors. But here's the interesting part. The pressure was always just enough to avoid legal scrutiny, until today. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Mark's yard as federal agents continued their work. Karen remained conspicuously absent, having retreated into her RV hours ago. Surveillance teams monitored the vehicle discreetly, ensuring she couldn't flee. "The complexity of this scheme is unprecedented," Agent Collins said, reviewing Steve's USB drive contents. Each shell company was structured to appear independent, but they all fed into a central network. Elite property management wasn't just about landscaping. It was a front for money laundering. Linda Chen's security footage revealed more suspicious patterns. Regular deliveries to the community center after hours, meetings with contractors who never seemed to do any actual work, board members arriving and leaving at odd hours. "Look at the timestamps," Steve pointed out. Every major financial transfer was preceded by one of these meetings. They were coordinating their activities right under our noses. The investigation had taken on a life of its own. What started as one homeowner's stand against HOA overreach had exposed a sophisticated criminal operation. Agent Collins' team had uncovered links to similar schemes across the country, each operating under different names but following the same playbook. The psychological manipulation was key, Jennifer explained to the agents. Karen didn't just use fines and regulations. She created an atmosphere of fear and isolation. Neighbors were afraid to talk to each other, afraid to question anything. Tom Bennett's research had uncovered another disturbing pattern. In each community, she targeted influential residents first, people who might rally opposition. She'd find their vulnerabilities, exploit them, force them out, or silence them. But Oakwood Estates had proved different. Mark's refusal to be intimidated, combined with Steve's careful documentation and the community's unexpected unity, had broken the pattern. Outside, the crowd had thinned but remained vigilant. Patricia Turner had organized a rotation of neighbors to monitor the situation, ensuring Karen couldn't quietly slip away. The community that Karen had worked so hard to divide was now united in purpose. "We've identified her real identity," Agent Rodriguez announced, returning from a call with headquarters. "Catherine Winfield. She's been running similar operations for over a decade. Different names, different states, but always the same methodology." The revelation sent ripples through the gathered investigators. Catherine Winfield was a name connected to multiple fraud investigations, but she had always managed to stay one step ahead of authorities. "She's not leaving this time," Agent Collins stated firmly. "We've got enough evidence to freeze her assets, and with Steve's documentation of the offshore accounts, we can trace every dollar she's stolen." As evening approached, the investigation showed no signs of slowing. Federal agents had set up floodlights around the RV, transforming Mark's driveway into something resembling a crime scene. Inside the vehicle, Karen, now known to be Catherine Winfield, remained silent, her empire crumbling around her. Jennifer Martinez worked with her legal team to prepare injunctions and class action paperwork. The scope of potential plaintiffs expanded hourly as more communities discovered their connections to the scheme. "We're not just looking at HOA fraud," Agent Collins explained to Mark. "This is systematic racketeering, money laundering, wire fraud, and possibly international financial crimes. Your stand against that RV didn't just save your community, it exposed a criminal enterprise that's been operating for years." The evening news vans began arriving, kept at a distance by local police. The story was spreading, and with it came calls from other communities recognizing the pattern. Tom Bennett's phone rang constantly with calls from officials in other cities, each sharing similar stories of HOA takeovers and mysterious contractor requirements. She never expected this level of resistance, Linda Chen observed, watching the activity from Mark's porch. In other places, people just paid the fines, accepted the rules, kept their heads down. She didn't count on us coming together. As night fell over Oakwood Estates, the evidence wall in Mark's living room had grown to encompass an entire criminal empire. Agent Collins coordinated with teams in other states, piecing together a decade of systematic fraud and community exploitation. The RV that had arrived as a symbol of intimidation now stood as a monument to justice, its presence a reminder that sometimes the biggest changes start with one person's refusal to be bullied. "We'll need your continued cooperation," Agent Collins told Mark as the investigation settled into its night phase. "This case is going to have far-reaching implications for HOA governance nationwide." Mark nodded, watching his transformed community from his porch. The fear that had gripped Oakwood Estates for months had been replaced by something stronger: unity, purpose, and the knowledge that together they had exposed a truth that would help countless others. The night air carried the quiet conversations of neighbors standing watch, federal agents processing evidence, and the occasional burst of activity around Karen's RV. What had started as a simple act of defiance had become something much larger. A moment of reckoning for those who would abuse power and exploit communities for profit. As dawn broke over Oakwood Estates on the second day of the investigation, a tense silence hung in the air. Catherine Winfield, formerly known as Karen Wilson, sat in her RV surrounded by federal agents. The vehicle that had been meant as a tool of intimidation had become her temporary prison. Special Agent Sarah Collins reviewed overnight reports with her team in Mark's living room, now a fully operational command center. Screens displayed financial data streams, surveillance footage, and real-time updates from field agents across multiple states. 3 more communities have come forward, Agent Collins announced, pinning new locations to the evidence map. All with identical patterns. We're looking at systematic fraud exceeding $50 million. Michael Drake, a forensic accountant flown in from the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, highlighted transaction patterns on his laptop. The money laundering scheme was brilliantly complex. Each HOA became a self-contained cell, with funds moving through multiple shell companies before disappearing offshore. Jennifer Martinez entered with fresh coffee and new legal documents. "We've secured emergency injunctions in 7 jurisdictions. Every property management company connected to Catherine's network is now under scrutiny." A knock at the door revealed Tom Bennett, the city council member, looking exhausted but determined. State authorities are involved now. The governor just announced a task force to investigate HOA fraud statewide. A thick morning fog blanketed Oakwood Estates, shrouding Catherine Winfield's RV in an ethereal haze. The federal command center established in Mark Thompson's living room hummed with activity as Special Agent Sarah Collins reviewed overnight developments with her expanding team. Michael Drake, the FBI's top forensic accountant, gestured to a complex web of transactions displayed on his laptop. Each community was set up as an independent cell, he explained, tracing money flows with his finger. The brilliance was in the mundane nature of it all. Landscaping fees, violation notices, maintenance contracts. Who questions a $100 HOA fine? Jennifer Martinez entered, carrying a stack of freshly printed court orders. "We've secured emergency injunctions across 7 states. Every property management company connected to Catherine's network is now frozen." The scope of the investigation had exploded overnight. What began as one homeowner's stand against HOA intimidation had uncovered a nationwide criminal enterprise that preyed on suburban communities. Tom Bennett, the city council member, spread a map across Mark's dining table, marking affected neighborhoods with red pins. "The pattern is clearer now," Agent Collins observed, studying the map. She targeted transitional communities, areas with high turnover, aging populations, or rapid development, places where people were less likely to form strong connections with their neighbors. Inside the RV, Catherine Winfield maintained her silence, but her carefully constructed world was unraveling. Overnight, federal agents had traced connections to similar operations in 14 states, each operating under different aliases but following the same methodical playbook. The crisp morning air carried the scent of fresh coffee as FBI analysts worked tirelessly in Mark Thompson's transformed living room. Special Agent Sarah Collins studied surveillance feeds showing Catherine Winfield's RV still anchored in the driveway like a beached whale. The woman, formerly known as Karen Wilson, hadn't emerged since the previous afternoon, communicating only through her newly appointed criminal defense attorney. Michael Drake, the forensic accountant, highlighted complex financial patterns on multiple screens. "The genius was in its simplicity," he explained to the gathered agents. "Small fines, maintenance fees, contractor requirements, all legitimate on the surface, but multiplied across hundreds of households in multiple communities, it became a river of money flowing straight into offshore accounts." Jennifer Martinez spread new court documents across the kitchen counter. "We've secured emergency injunctions in 12 jurisdictions now. Every property management company connected to her network is frozen. The judge in Martinez County just authorized seizure of all elite property management assets." Outside, the neighborhood had transformed into something resembling a command post. Federal vehicles lined the streets, their presence a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and decorative garden flags. Local news vans maintained their vigil at the perimeter, hungry for updates on the story that had captivated viewers across the country. "The psychological manipulation was masterful," explained Dr. Emily Chen, an FBI behavioral analyst who had arrived overnight. "She created an atmosphere of constant surveillance and arbitrary punishment. When people feel watched and vulnerable, they're less likely to question authority." Tom Bennett arrived with fresh intelligence from the state capitol. "The governor's office is launching a comprehensive audit of every HOA in the state. They're already finding similar patterns in other communities. Different names, same playbook." Agent Collins nodded, adding another pin to the evidence map that now covered an entire wall. Catherine Winfield didn't just steal money. She stole people's sense of security in their own homes. Every fine, every violation notice, every forced contractor usage was designed to create compliance through fear. The morning sun climbed higher as more federal resources poured into Oakwood Estates. Cybersecurity experts traced digital footprints while forensic accountants untangled webs of shell companies. Each discovery revealed new layers of sophistication in Catherine's operation. "Look at this," Michael Drake called out, pointing to his screen. Every time she established a new HOA presence, there was a corresponding creation of support infrastructure. Law firms, property management companies, compliance consultants, all shells, all connected through a maze of offshore entities. Linda Chen arrived with security footage from other neighborhoods where Catherine had operated. The videos showed similar patterns: late-night meetings, mysterious deliveries, and a rotating cast of contractors who seemed to do little actual work. "She built an empire on people's desire for order," Dr. Chen observed, reviewing resident interviews. "HOAs attract those who want structure and predictability. Catherine exploited that desire, turning it into a weapon against the very people she claimed to protect." Inside the RV, Catherine's silence spoke volumes. Her attorney, Marcus Reynolds, emerged briefly to confer with federal agents. "My client maintains her innocence and asserts that all actions were taken in accordance with HOA bylaws and state regulations." Agent Collins barely concealed her skepticism. Your client operated under at least 7 different identities across multiple states. That's not the behavior of someone acting within the law. The investigation had expanded beyond simple financial fraud. Evidence suggested Catherine had built a sophisticated network of intimidation and control, using HOAs as both cover and weapon. Each community she targeted followed the same pattern: gain control through legitimate means, implement increasingly restrictive rules, establish preferred vendors, then extract maximum profit through a combination of fines and forced services. The psychological impact on these communities will take years to heal, Dr. Chen explained to Agent Collins. People who've lived under this kind of systematic manipulation often struggle to trust their neighbors or participate in community governance. By mid-morning, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had traced over $70 million in fraudulent transactions. The money flowed through a labyrinth of shell companies before disappearing into offshore accounts, only to emerge later in legitimate investments across the country. She wasn't just stealing from HOAs, Michael Drake revealed. She was building a legitimate business empire with stolen funds, shopping centers, office buildings, residential developments, all purchased with money extracted from these communities. Jennifer Martinez worked with her legal team to prepare class action documentation. The list of potential plaintiffs grew hourly as more communities recognized their connection to Catherine's scheme. We're looking at thousands of affected homeowners across multiple states. The damages could be astronomical. Tom Bennett's phone rang constantly with calls from other municipalities. They're all finding the same patterns, he reported. Sudden rule changes, preferred vendor lists, escalating fines. She created a template for systematic exploitation and replicated it perfectly. As noon approached, Catherine's attorney emerged, again, this time with a proposal. My client is willing to provide information about similar operations in exchange for consideration during sentencing. Agent Collins exchanged glances with her team. Your client isn't in a position to negotiate. We're finding new evidence hourly. By the time we're done, we'll know more about her operation than she does. The community's response continued to evolve. What began as a gathering of concerned neighbors had become an organized movement. Jack and Susan Cooper coordinated with homeowners in other affected communities, sharing information and building a network of support. Patricia Turner's meticulous records proved invaluable to investigators. Her 30 years of HOA documentation provided crucial context, showing how Catherine's scheme differed from normal community governance. She turned our desire for a beautiful neighborhood into a weapon against us, Patricia observed. The afternoon brought new revelations as federal agents executed search warrants across multiple states. Storage units rented under various aliases yielded documents, computer equipment, and evidence of other identities waiting to be deployed. She was preparing to expand, Agent Collins realized. Each new identity was carefully crafted, complete, with background documentation and business relationships. This was going to get bigger. Dr. Chen reviewed psychological profiles of other HOA presidents who had worked with Catherine. She chose her collaborators carefully, people who craved authority but lacked the confidence to question her methods. She made them feel powerful while using them as puppets. The investigation's scope continued to expand. Financial analysts discovered links to similar operations in Canada and the United Kingdom, suggesting Catherine's model had international reach. She was exporting her methodology, Michael Drake explained, teaching others how to replicate her success. As evening approached, Catherine finally requested a meeting with federal agents. Through her attorney, she expressed a desire to clarify certain misunderstandings about her business practices. Agent Collins prepared for the interview with Dr. Chen's assistance. She'll try to rationalize everything, Dr. Chen warned. In her mind, she's not a criminal. She's an entrepreneur who gave communities what they wanted: order, structure, and clear rules. The sun set over Oakwood Estates, casting long shadows across Mark's yard. The RV that had arrived as a symbol of authority now stood as a monument to hubris, its presence a reminder that sometimes the greatest crimes hide behind the most ordinary facades. Jennifer Martinez worked late into the night, coordinating with lawyers across the country. "This isn't just about recovering stolen money," she explained to Mark. "It's about preventing this from happening again. HOAs serve a legitimate purpose, but they need proper oversight and transparency." The evidence wall in Mark's living room had become a map of systematic exploitation, each connection revealing new aspects of Catherine's scheme. But beyond the financial fraud and legal violations, it told a story of communities awakening to their own strength, of neighbors rediscovering their voices. As darkness fell, Agent Collins reviewed the day's developments with her team. The investigation had moved far beyond one woman's attempt to intimidate a homeowner. It had exposed a nationwide criminal enterprise that preyed on people's desire for community and order, turning their own rules against them. The night brought a sense of anticipation. Tomorrow, Catherine Winfield would face questioning, her carefully constructed world finally exposed to the light of justice. But the impact of her scheme would ripple through suburban communities for years to come, a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats hide behind the most respectable facades. In Mark's driveway, the RV stood silent under federal surveillance, its presence now a symbol not of authority, but of resistance. Proof that one person's stand against intimidation could expose a truth that would help countless others. Dawn broke over Oakwood Estates as Catherine Winfield was escorted from her RV into a federal vehicle. Her designer athleisure wear had been replaced by a more somber business suit, her previously perfect hair showing signs of a sleepless night. Special Agent Sarah Collins watched the transfer from Mark's porch, noting how the woman's confident facade had begun to crack. Inside the makeshift command center, Michael Drake had made a breakthrough in the financial investigation. "Look at this pattern," he said, pointing to a complex series of transactions. Every time she established a new operation, there was an initial investment from a company called Summit Enterprises. We traced it back to a venture capital firm specializing in distressed real estate. Agent Rodriguez entered with fresh coffee and startling news. The venture capital connection goes deeper. They weren't just funding her operations. They were identifying target communities, areas with high foreclosure rates, aging populations, places ripe for gentrification. Jennifer Martinez arrived early, carrying boxes of legal documents. "The class action lawsuit is expanding. We've identified similar operations in 23 states. Each one followed the same template, but with local variations to avoid detection." Dr. Emily Chen studied security footage of Catherine's previous HOA meetings. The psychological manipulation was precisely calibrated. She would introduce small changes gradually, each one seemingly reasonable on its own. By the time residents realized what was happening, they were already trapped in her system. In the FBI's mobile interview unit parked down the street, Catherine finally began to talk. Her story revealed a calculated scheme that went beyond simple fraud. "Communities need structure," she insisted, her voice steady. "I provided that structure. The fact that I profited from it doesn't make it wrong." In the FBI's mobile interview unit, Catherine Winfield sat across from Special Agent Sarah Collins, her perfectly manicured nails tapping rhythmically on the metal table. The early morning light filtered through tinted windows, casting shadows across her face as she began to explain her empire. "You're looking at this all wrong," Catherine said, her voice carrying the same authoritative tone she had used in countless HOA meetings. "I didn't create this system. I merely perfected it. Communities crave order, structure, predictability. I gave them what they wanted." Agent Collins laid out photographs of various properties Catherine had targeted. And the millions in fraudulent fees, the shell companies, the offshore accounts. Was that also giving communities what they wanted? A slight smile played across Catherine's lips. "Every business has overhead. Mine just happened to be more complex than most." Outside the interview unit, Michael Drake huddled with forensic accountants, unraveling the intricate web of financial transactions that had fueled Catherine's operation. Summit Enterprises wasn't just providing seed money, he explained to Agent Rodriguez. They were strategic partners, identifying vulnerable communities and creating the conditions for Catherine's takeover. Jennifer Martinez arrived at the Taita command center with more troubling news. "We found connections to zoning board members in multiple cities. Catherine's organization wasn't just controlling HOAs, they were influencing municipal decisions, steering development contracts, manipulating property values." Dr. Emily Chen observed the interview through a video feed, noting Catherine's body language and rhetorical patterns. "She's still in control mode," the behavioral analyst noted. "Watch how she frames everything as a service to the community. In her mind, she's not a criminal, she's a visionary." Inside the interview room, Catherine leaned forward. "Do you know what these communities were like before I arrived? Chaos, inconsistent enforcement, no clear standards. I brought order to that chaos. Yes, I profited, but everyone profits from order." Agent Collins spread out more evidence: bank statements, shell company registrations, offshore transfer records. "Order doesn't require fraud, Ms. Winfield. It doesn't require intimidation or extortion." "Extortion," Catherine scoffed. "Every fine was outlined in the bylaws. Every contract went through proper channels. If people chose not to read the fine print, how is that my responsibility?" Meanwhile, in Mark's living room, the investigation continued to expand. Tom Bennett arrived with documents from the state capitol. The governor's task force has uncovered similar operations in neighboring states, each one protected by layers of legitimate-looking paperwork, all connected to Summit Enterprises. The morning sun climbed higher as Catherine's carefully constructed narrative began to unravel. Agent Rodriguez discovered emails revealing the true nature of her relationship with Summit Enterprises. They weren't just financiers, he reported. They were using her HOA takeovers to drive down property values, then buying up foreclosed homes through shell companies. Linda Chen brought in more security footage, showing late-night meetings between Catherine and various Summit executives. It was never just about HOA fees, Linda realized. The entire operation was designed to reshape communities for corporate takeover. In the interview room, Catherine's composure started to crack as Agent Collins presented evidence of her coordination with Summit. "You don't understand the bigger picture," she insisted. "These communities needed investment, development, modernization. We provided a path to that future. By destroying people's lives," Agent Collins pushed back, "by forcing them out of their homes through fraudulent fees and selective enforcement." Catherine's mask slipped slightly. "Progress has a price. Not everyone can afford to be part of an improving community." Dr. Chen noted the shift in Catherine's demeanor. She's revealing her true ideology now. The HOA scheme wasn't just about money. It was about social engineering, about deciding who deserves to live in these communities. The investigation had uncovered a deeper layer of manipulation. Through careful analysis of Catherine's records, the FBI team discovered that her HOA takeovers often coincided with larger development plans. Summit Enterprises would identify target communities, Catherine would establish control through the HOA, and then systematic pressure would begin. "Look at the pattern," Michael Drake explained, displaying maps of affected communities. "First, increased fees and selective enforcement drive out vulnerable homeowners. Then, property values drop temporarily. Summit's shell companies swoop in to buy foreclosed properties. Finally, once they control enough real estate, mysterious zoning changes appear, allowing for commercial development." Jennifer Martinez worked with her legal team to expand the scope of their class action lawsuit. "This goes beyond HOA fraud," she explained to gathered homeowners. "This was a coordinated effort to systematically dismantle communities for corporate profit." Catherine's interview continued, her responses becoming more defensive as Agent Collins presented evidence of the broader conspiracy. "Everything we did was technically legal," she insisted. "We operated within the system." "A system you deliberately corrupted," Agent Collins countered. "You didn't just abuse HOA authority, you weaponized it against the very people it was meant to protect." Outside the interview unit, the community of Oakwood Estates had gathered. Once again, Patricia Turner organized a support network for homeowners facing similar situations in other communities. "We need to share what we've learned," she urged. "Help others recognize the signs before it's too late." The investigation revealed how Catherine's operation had evolved over time. What began as simple HOA fraud had grown into a sophisticated system of community manipulation. Summit Enterprises provided the financial backing and strategic direction, while Catherine's network of shell companies and corrupt officials executed the plan on the ground. "Each community was like a test case," Dr. Chen explained, reviewing patterns across different locations. She refined her methods, learned from mistakes, adapted to local conditions. The psychological manipulation became more subtle, more effective. As morning turned to afternoon, Catherine's facade continued to crumble. The evidence against her was overwhelming, but more importantly, her justifications began to sound hollow even to her own ears. "You still don't understand," she said, almost pleading now. "I brought order to chaos." "No," Agent Collins replied firmly. "You brought chaos disguised as order. You turned neighbors against each other, destroyed community bonds, all for profit." The impact of Catherine's scheme extended far beyond financial losses. Dr. Chen's analysis revealed lasting psychological damage in affected communities. People lost trust not just in HOAs, but in their neighbors, in community governance itself. Rebuilding that trust will take years. Jennifer Martinez worked late into the afternoon, coordinating with attorneys across the country. The legal implications of the case were staggering. "We're not just seeking financial restitution," she explained to Mark. "We're pushing for fundamental reforms in HOA oversight and regulation." As the day progressed, more details emerged about Summit Enterprises' role in the scheme. The venture capital firm had created an elaborate network of shell companies, each designed to hide their involvement in community takeovers. Through Catherine's HOA manipulation, they had acquired millions in real estate at artificially depressed prices. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit traced money flowing through multiple jurisdictions, revealing the true scale of the operation. "This wasn't just about HOA fees," Michael Drake reported. "The fraud was a means to an end, creating conditions for large-scale real estate acquisition and development." Catherine's RV, still parked in Mark's driveway, had become a symbol of resistance. Community members took turns documenting its presence, ensuring that this physical evidence of corporate overreach would be preserved for the ongoing investigation. By late afternoon, Catherine's interview had revealed crucial details about Summit Enterprises' broader strategy. The company had targeted dozens of communities across the country, using Catherine's HOA takeover model as a tool for acquiring property and influencing development. "The genius was in its patience," Agent Rodriguez observed. "They didn't rush the process. Each phase was carefully timed, established control, increase pressure, wait for foreclosures, acquire properties, change zoning laws. It could take years, but the payoff was enormous. The community's response continued to evolve. What began as one homeowner's stand against HOA intimidation had become a movement for reform. Jack and Susan Cooper organized workshops to help other communities recognize signs of corporate manipulation in their HOAs. As evening approached, Catherine finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of her situation. Her carefully constructed world had been exposed, her justifications stripped away. The woman who had arrived in an RV to intimidate a homeowner now sat defeated, her empire crumbling around her. Agent Collins concluded the interview with a final observation. "You didn't just steal money, Ms. Winfield, you stole people's sense of community, their trust in their neighbors, their belief in fair governance. That's a debt you can never repay." The sun set over Oakwood Estates, casting long shadows across Mark's property. The investigation had revealed a truth about modern community life, how vulnerable neighborhoods can be to systematic manipulation, and how important it is to maintain genuine connections between neighbors. As federal agents prepared to transport Catherine to a holding facility, the community gathered one last time. They weren't just witnesses to a crime, they were survivors of a sophisticated attempt to destroy their community from within. Their unity in the face of corporate greed had exposed a nationwide scheme and sparked a movement for reform. The RV that had arrived as a symbol of intimidation would soon be towed away, but its impact would resonate far beyond Oakwood Estates. It had become a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats to community come disguised as protection, and that the strongest defense against such threats is the courage to stand together against intimidation. As Catherine Winfield was led away from the FBI's mobile interview unit, Special Agent Sarah Collins turned her attention to a new development in the investigation. An encrypted email recovered from Catherine's devices had revealed connections to a larger network of corporate manipulators operating under the innocuous name Community Enhancement Partners. "This goes deeper than Summit Enterprises," Michael Drake announced, spreading financial documents across the command center table. "We've uncovered a nationwide consortium of investment firms, each using variations of Catherine's HOA takeover model. They share data, strategies, even personnel." Jennifer Martinez arrived with a stack of newly subpoenaed records. The pattern extends beyond residential communities. They're targeting small business districts, historic neighborhoods, anywhere with potential for large-scale redevelopment. The HOA scheme was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. In the early morning light, Agent Rodriguez interviewed former Summit executives who had come forward after Catherine's arrest. Their testimonies painted a picture of corporate greed masked as community improvement. The morning sun cast long shadows across Oakwood Estates as Special Agent Sarah Collins studied an encrypted email chain recovered from Catherine Winfield's devices. The messages revealed a vast network operating under the name Community Enhancement Partners, a consortium of investment firms using HOA manipulation as a tool for corporate takeover. Michael Drake, surrounded by financial documents in the command center, traced complex money flows through dozens of shell companies. Each investment firm operates independently on the surface, but they're all connected through a series of offshore holding companies. They share resources, strategies, even personnel. Jennifer Martinez arrived with boxes of subpoenaed records, her eyes bright with discovery. "Look at these development plans," she said, spreading blueprints across the table. Every community Catherine targeted was part of a larger redevelopment scheme. The HOA takeovers weren't just about control, they were about preparing these neighborhoods for corporate acquisition. Agent Rodriguez sat with James Peterson, a former Summit Enterprise's executive who had come forward. It started small, James explained, his voice heavy with regret. We identified struggling communities, offered to help modernize their HOAs, streamline operations. But then we saw the potential for more. Dr. Emily Chen reviewed psychological profiles of other corporate operatives involved in the scheme. They specifically recruited people with backgrounds in community organization, local government, property management, people who understood how neighborhoods work, how to manipulate social dynamics. Tom Bennett burst into the command center with urgent news from the state capital. They found similar operations in every major city, each one disguised as a community improvement initiative, but all feeding into the same corporate network. Outside, Mark's driveway had become a hub of activity as federal agents processed Catherine's RV for evidence. Forensic teams discovered hidden compartments containing documents detailing operations in communities across the country. Linda Chen approached Agent Collins with security footage from other neighborhoods. We've identified operatives using Catherine's methods in at least 30 other communities, each one following the same playbook but adapted for local conditions. The investigation revealed a sophisticated system of corporate infiltration. Community enhancement partners didn't just target HOAs. They worked to influence local zoning boards, manipulate property values, and create conditions that forced longtime residents to sell. The genius was in its subtlety, Dr. Chen explained. Reviewing case files, they didn't just come in and buy properties. They systematically changed the character of these communities, making them unaffordable and unlivable for existing residents. Patricia Turner organized a community meeting in her living room, where residents shared stories of similar experiences. It wasn't just about fines and regulations, she observed. They were trying to break our community spirit, make us feel powerless and isolated. The FBI's cybercrime unit decoded more encrypted communications, revealing a network of corporate operatives embedded in communities across the country. Each operative followed Catherine's model, using HOA authority as a weapon against homeowners. Jennifer Martinez worked with her legal team to expand the scope of their investigation. We're not just looking at fraud anymore, she explained to gathered residents. This is systematic displacement of communities for corporate profit, disguised as neighborhood improvement. As the day progressed, more whistleblowers came forward. Former employees of various investment firms revealed how they had been trained to identify vulnerable communities and implement takeover strategies. Agent Sarah Collins spread surveillance photos across the command center table, each image revealing another layer of corporate infiltration. Community enhancement partners had operatives placed in local government positions, real estate offices, and community organizations across the country. Michael Drake's financial analysis revealed a pattern of strategic investments designed to destabilize target communities. They didn't just manipulate HOAs, he explained. They bought key commercial properties, influenced local businesses, even funded seemingly independent community groups, all to create the conditions they needed for takeover. In Mark's living room, now transformed into an evidence processing center, Jennifer Martinez worked with a team of paralegals to document each instance of corporate manipulation. The web of connections grew more complex with each new discovery. James Peterson, the former Summit executive, continued his testimony. The HOA scheme was just phase one. Once we controlled the community governance, we could implement broader changes, rezoning requests, development variances, selective code enforcement. Everything was designed to make long-term residents want to leave. Dr. Emily Chen interviewed residents from affected communities, documenting patterns of psychological manipulation. They created an atmosphere of constant uncertainty, she noted. Rules would change arbitrarily, enforcement was inconsistent, neighbor was pitted against neighbor. It was social engineering on a neighborhood scale. Agent Sarah Collins stood in the heart of the FBI's temporary command center, examining a wall of evidence that revealed the true scope of corporate manipulation. The morning light filtered through Mark's living room windows, illuminating photographs, financial records, and connection maps that told a story of systematic community exploitation. Michael Drake's team had uncovered a network far more extensive than initially suspected. Community enhancement partners operated through dozens of seemingly independent firms, each following Catherine's model but adapted for different regions and demographics. "Look at this pattern," Drake explained, pointing to a series of transactions. Every time they targeted a new community, they first established legitimate businesses in the area. Coffee shops, real estate offices, property management companies. They built credibility before beginning the takeover. Jennifer Martinez arrived with new evidence from state investigators. "We found similar operations in 37 states, each one disguised as neighborhood improvement initiatives, but all feeding into the same corporate structure." James Peterson, the former Summit executive, continued providing crucial details about the organization's methods. "We called it community reshaping. First, establish presence through local businesses, then gain control of the HOA. Finally, implement changes that would drive out long-term residents." Dr. Emily Chen analyzed patterns of psychological manipulation used in target communities. They created artificial crises to justify their interventions. Water quality concerns, crime rate exaggerations, property value threats, anything to make residents feel vulnerable and dependent on their solutions. Tom Bennett burst in with news from the state capitol. "The governor's task force has uncovered connections to major development corporations. These weren't just local schemes. They were part of a nationwide gentrification strategy." Linda Chen's security footage revealed meetings between corporate operatives and local officials across multiple communities. The videos showed how community enhancement partners groomed and recruited influential residents to support their agenda. In the FBI's Mobile Analysis Unit, technicians decoded encrypted communications between network members. The messages revealed a sophisticated system of corporate infiltration, with operatives embedded in key positions throughout target communities. Patricia Turner organized a database of affected homeowners, documenting each instance of selective enforcement and financial pressure. "They didn't just want our homes," she observed. "They wanted to erase our communities and replace them with their corporate vision." Agent Rodriguez interviewed former employees from various front companies. Each testimony added new details to the investigation, revealing how the organization identified and exploited vulnerable neighborhoods. The financial trails led to offshore accounts controlled by a complex web of shell companies. Drake's team traced millions in stolen HOA fees and fraudulent fines, all funneled into corporate development projects. Outside, agents processed Catherine's RV, discovering hidden compartments containing documents about pending operations in other communities. The evidence suggested dozens of neighborhoods were being prepared for similar takeovers. Jennifer Martinez worked with federal prosecutors to expand the scope of their investigation. "This isn't just about HOA fraud anymore," she explained. "We're looking at RICO violations, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, a complete corporate takeover of American neighborhoods." Dr. Chen interviewed more residents from affected communities, documenting the psychological impact of systematic intimidation. They created an atmosphere of constant uncertainty. People never knew when they might receive a violation notice or face new restrictions. Mark watched from his porch as federal agents continued their work. His simple stand against HOA overreach had exposed a corporate conspiracy that threatened neighborhoods across the country. Agent Collins reviewed surveillance footage showing corporate operatives meeting with local officials. The videos revealed how community enhancement partners influenced zoning decisions, development approvals, and property assessments. James Peterson provided details about the organization's training methods. New operatives spent months learning how to manipulate community dynamics. They studied successful takeovers, learned to identify vulnerable neighborhoods, mastered the art of creating artificial crises. Legal teams from multiple jurisdictions coordinated their responses to the growing scandal. The evidence suggested a level of corporate infiltration that would require fundamental changes in how communities were governed and protected. Linda Chen discovered patterns in community disruption tactics. They would start with small changes: new parking restrictions, landscaping requirements, noise ordinances. Each rule seemed reasonable on its own, but together they made life increasingly difficult for residents. The FBI's cybercrime unit traced digital communications between network members, revealing a sophisticated system of coordination and control. Operatives shared success stories, warned of potential resistance, and coordinated their activities across multiple communities. Tom Bennett worked with state investigators to identify compromised officials. The corruption extended through multiple levels of local government, with key positions filled by people connected to community enhancement partners. Dr. Chen analyzed the psychological tactics used to divide communities. They created artificial divisions between neighbors, encouraged reporting of minor violations, rewarded compliance, and punished resistance. It was a form of social engineering designed to break community bonds. Agent Rodriguez interviewed more corporate whistleblowers, each providing new details about the organization's methods and goals. The testimony revealed a systematic approach to community takeover, refined through years of trial and error. Jennifer Martinez prepared legal briefs outlining the full scope of corporate manipulation. The documents detailed how community enhancement partners had created a template for neighborhood takeover that could be replicated anywhere in the country. Mark's living room had become a hub of investigation and resistance, with federal agents and community members working together to expose corporate manipulation. The evidence wall grew daily, revealing new connections and conspiracies. Patricia Turner organized community meetings to share information about corporate tactics. Residents from multiple neighborhoods compared experiences, identifying patterns of manipulation and control. The investigation revealed how community enhancement partners had created a self-perpetuating system of community control. Each successful takeover provided resources and lessons for the next operation, allowing the network to grow exponentially. As evening approached, Agent Collins received word that similar investigations were being launched in other countries. The corporate playbook for community takeover had spread internationally, threatening neighborhoods around the world. The setting sun cast long shadows across Oakwood Estates as federal agents continued their work. What had begun as one homeowner's stand against HOA overreach had exposed a global network of corporate manipulation, sparking a movement for community protection and reform. Mark stood in his driveway, watching as teams of investigators processed evidence and interviewed witnesses. His quiet suburban street had become ground zero in a battle for the future of American neighborhoods, a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats to community come disguised as improvements. The investigation would continue, but already it had revealed a truth about modern life, that communities must remain vigilant against corporate infiltration, and that the strongest defense against systematic manipulation is the courage to stand together against intimidation. As darkness fell, Agent Collins reviewed the day's developments with her team. The evidence suggested that Catherine's operation was just one part of a larger movement to reshape American communities for corporate profit. But in exposing the scheme, They had also revealed the power of united neighbors standing against corporate greed. The lights burned late in the command center as federal agents continued their work, knowing that somewhere other communities face similar threats. But now they had hope. Hope born from one homeowner's refusal to be intimidated and from the courage of neighbors who chose to stand together against corporate manipulation. Special Agent Sarah Collins stared at a series of photographs spread across the command center table. The images showed clandestine meetings between community enhancement partners, executives, and foreign investors, revealing an international dimension to the neighborhood takeover scheme. The early morning light cast shadows across documents detailing wire transfers to accounts in Singapore, Dubai, and Luxembourg. "We've identified a new player," Michael Drake announced, pulling up financial records on his laptop. "Global Community Ventures. They're based in London, but operate through subsidiaries in 12 countries. They've been implementing Catherine's model overseas, targeting historic neighborhoods in European cities." Jennifer Martinez entered with fresh legal documents bearing official seals from multiple jurisdictions. "The international warrants just came through. We can now access records from foreign banks and development companies linked to the scheme." The command center buzzed with activity as FBI cybercrime specialists tracked digital communications between network members across continents. Each new discovery revealed how deeply the corporate infiltration had penetrated communities worldwide. Agent Rodriguez interviewed a former Global Community Ventures executive who had come forward after seeing news coverage of Catherine's arrest. "They called it urban renewal optimization," the executive explained, hands trembling slightly. "But it was really about erasing existing communities and replacing them with corporate-controlled environments." Dr. Emily Chen reviewed psychological profiles of international operatives, noting disturbing patterns. They specifically recruited people with cultural knowledge of target communities, individuals who could understand and exploit local social dynamics. The manipulation was always tailored to regional sensibilities. Linda Chen arrived with surveillance footage from Asian communities targeted by the network. The videos showed familiar patterns of HOA manipulation adapted for different cultural contexts. "They knew exactly how to pressure each community," she observed. "Every tactic was culturally calibrated." Tom Bennett coordinated with international authorities, sharing information about corporate infiltration methods. "The playbook is the same everywhere," he reported. "Establish legitimate presence, gain control of community governance, implement changes that force out long-time residents." The morning sun climbed higher as federal agents processed new evidence from overseas operations. Financial analysts traced complex money flows through international banks, revealing a global network of corporate manipulation. Patricia Turner organized video conferences with resident groups from affected communities around the world. Stories shared across language. Barriers showed striking similarities in how the corporate network operated. James Peterson continued providing crucial information about international connections. Summit Enterprises was just one node in a global network. Each regional operation had autonomy in implementation, but they all followed the same basic strategy. The FBI's International Liaison Office coordinated with law enforcement agencies worldwide. Evidence suggested that community enhancement partners had established influence in key positions across multiple countries. Mark watched from his porch as diplomatic vehicles arrived, carrying representatives from various nations affected by the corporate scheme. His quiet suburban street had become the epicenter of a global investigation. Dr. Chen analyzed cultural adaptation patterns in the network's operations. They understood that community manipulation had to reflect local values and customs. What worked in American suburbs wouldn't work in European villages or Asian neighborhoods. Jennifer Martinez worked with international legal teams to coordinate responses across jurisdictions. The evidence suggested a level of corporate infiltration that would require unprecedented global cooperation to address. Agent Collins reviewed footage from community meetings in different countries. Despite cultural differences, the corporate playbook remained consistent. Create division, establish control, force change. Michael Drake's financial team uncovered patterns in international property acquisition. They used local economic crises as opportunities for community takeover. Whenever a region faced hardship, their shell companies would appear with promises of revitalization. The command center received updates from investigators worldwide. Each report added new details to their understanding of how the corporate network operated across cultural and national boundaries. Linda Chen discovered connections between seemingly unrelated development projects in different countries. The evidence showed how community enhancement partners coordinated global operations while maintaining local facades. Tom Bennett worked with international authorities to identify compromised officials across multiple nations. The corruption extended through various levels of government, transcending national borders. Dr. Chen analyzed psychological tactics adapted for different cultures. They understood how community pressure points varied by region. What might work in a German neighborhood would need complete reformation for use in Japan. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with Interpol to track network operatives moving between countries. The investigation revealed a sophisticated system of international personnel deployment and training. Jennifer Martinez prepared legal briefs addressing international jurisdiction issues. The documents detailed how the corporate network exploited differences in legal systems to avoid detection and prosecution. Mark's living room had transformed into an international command center with screens showing real-time updates from investigations worldwide. Maps covered walls, tracking corporate infiltration across continents. Patricia Turner organized international community support networks, helping affected neighborhoods share information and strategies for resistance. The movement had grown beyond national boundaries. The investigation revealed how community enhancement partners had created a global template for community takeover. Each successful operation provided resources and lessons that could be applied anywhere in the world. As evening approached, Agent Collins received word of breakthrough discoveries in multiple countries. Investigators had uncovered training centers where corporate operatives learned to adapt takeover strategies for different cultural contexts. The setting sun cast long shadows across Oakwood Estates as international teams continued their work. What had begun as one homeowner's stand against HOA overreach had exposed a global network of corporate manipulation. Mark stood in his driveway, watching as diplomatic vehicles came and went. His quiet suburban street had become a symbol of resistance against corporate attempts to reshape communities worldwide. The investigation continued to expand, revealing new connections between international development companies and local community manipulation. Each discovery showed how deeply the corporate network had embedded itself in neighborhoods around the world. As darkness fell, Agent Collins reviewed global developments with her team. The evidence suggested that Catherine's operation was part of a worldwide movement to reshape communities for corporate profit, transcending national boundaries and cultural differences. The lights burned late in the command center as investigators from multiple nations coordinated their efforts. Somewhere, other communities faced similar threats, but now they had hope. Hope born from one homeowner's refusal to be intimidated and from the growing international movement to protect neighborhood integrity from corporate takeover. The investigation had revealed a fundamental truth about modern global society, that communities worldwide face similar threats from corporate infiltration, and that the strongest defense against systematic manipulation is international cooperation and solidarity. As dawn broke over Oakwood Estates, Special Agent Sarah Collins examined holographic displays projecting massive data sets that covered the evolution of corporate community manipulation techniques. The 3D visualizations, powered by advanced FBI analytics software, revealed intricate patterns of behavior modification used by community enhancement partners across decades. "We've uncovered their early experiments," Michael Drake announced, manipulating the holographic interface to highlight specific data points. They started in small, isolated communities, perfecting their methods before expanding to larger targets. Each failure taught them how to refine their approach. Jennifer Martinez strode into the command center, her tablet displaying real-time updates from global investigations. The psychological warfare aspect runs deeper than we thought. They developed specialized algorithms to identify vulnerable communities, using social media analysis and economic indicators to predict which neighborhoods would be most susceptible to their methods. Dr. Emily Chen studied neural mapping data collected from residents of affected communities. Advanced scanning technology revealed how prolonged exposure to corporate manipulation tactics had altered stress responses and decision-making patterns in target populations. "The neurological impact is significant," Dr. Chen explained, pointing to specific brain regions showing heightened activity. They didn't just change how communities functioned, they literally rewired how people thought about their neighborhoods. Agent Rodriguez burst through the door, clutching quantum-encrypted files recovered from Catherine's hidden servers. The technology goes beyond what we imagined. They developed AI systems to analyze community resistance patterns and generate countermeasures in real time. Tom Bennett arrived with reports from the state's Advanced Cybersecurity Unit. Their digital infiltration was unprecedented. Smart home systems, security cameras, even traffic lights, all compromised to gather data and exert control over daily life. Linda Chen's latest analysis revealed how the corporate network had utilized cutting-edge behavioral modification techniques, subtly altering everything from street lighting patterns to ambient sounds in public spaces to influence community behavior. The manipulation extended to the physical environment itself, Linda explained, showing microscopic changes in neighborhood infrastructure that had been designed to create subtle psychological pressure on residents. Mark watched from his porch. As specialized equipment was unloaded from government vehicles, each device designed to detect and analyze the various methods of community control employed by the corporate network. James Peterson continued his revelations, now aided by advanced truth verification technology that confirmed the authenticity of each statement. The technology wasn't just about surveillance, it was about creating an invisible cage around each community. The FBI's quantum computing division worked tirelessly to decrypt mountains of data recovered from community enhancement partners' global servers. Each decoded file revealed new layers of technological sophistication in their operation. Patricia Turner organized community members to undergo advanced psychological screening, helping investigators understand the full impact of corporate manipulation on resident mental health. Dr. Chen's team utilized state-of-the-art biometric scanners to measure stress responses in residents during community meetings, documenting the physiological impact of corporate control mechanisms. Jennifer Martinez coordinated with international cybersecurity experts, tracking digital tentacles of the corporate network through quantum-encrypted channels and dark web operations. As the investigation deepened, evidence emerged of experimental technologies being tested in target communities. subtle environmental modifications designed to influence behavior and decision-making at a subconscious level. Agent Collins reviewed holographic reconstructions of community transformation processes, watching as years of subtle changes were compressed into minutes of visual data. Michael Drake's financial analysis revealed how the corporation had utilized advanced AI systems to predict and manipulate property values, creating artificial market conditions that forced residents to sell. The command center hummed with energy as new data streams poured in from quantum sensors deployed throughout affected communities, each device measuring different aspects of corporate control mechanisms. Linda Chen discovered patterns in community surveillance that went beyond simple camera systems. The network had implemented advanced behavioral tracking algorithms that could predict and influence resident movements. Tom Bennett worked with state technology experts to understand how community infrastructure had been weaponized against residents, from smart meters to traffic signals. Dr. Chen analyzed neurological data showing how prolonged exposure to corporate manipulation had affected community decision-making patterns and social bonds. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with international technology experts to track the development and deployment of new control systems across global communities. Jennifer Martinez prepared legal briefings addressing the unprecedented technological aspects of community manipulation, developing new frameworks for prosecuting digital methods of social control. Mark's living room continued to evolve as a high-tech command center with holographic displays and quantum computers processing vast amounts of data from worldwide investigations. Patricia Turner organized resident groups to document technological aspects of community control, creating a comprehensive database of corporate manipulation methods. The investigation revealed how community enhancement partners had created a technological ecosystem designed to monitor, influence, and control every aspect of community life. As evening approached, Agent Collins received updates from quantum computing teams worldwide, each uncovering new aspects of the corporation's technological reach. The setting sun cast strange shadows through holographic displays as international teams continued their analysis of corporate control systems. Mark stood in his driveway, watching as specialized equipment detected and mapped the invisible web of technological control that had been woven through his neighborhood. The investigation continued to uncover new layers of technological sophistication in corporate community manipulation, each discovery revealing how deeply the network had embedded itself in modern urban life. As darkness fell, Agent Collins reviewed the day's technological discoveries with her team. The evidence suggested that Catherine's operation had been a testing ground for advanced methods of community control. The lights of quantum computers burned late into the night as investigators processed vast amounts of data, uncovering the full scope of technological manipulation in communities worldwide. The investigation had revealed a disturbing truth about modern society. That technology designed to improve community life could be weaponized for corporate control, requiring constant vigilance and adaptation from residents and authorities alike. Special Agent Sarah Collins studied the advanced data visualization screens that filled Mark's living room, each display revealing new layers of technological sophistication in community enhancement partners' operations. The morning light cast an eerie glow through the holographic projections of community surveillance networks. Michael Drake manipulated a three-dimensional model showing the evolution of corporate control systems. They started with basic camera networks and smart meters, he explained, rotating the display. But it evolved into something far more invasive. Every streetlight, every traffic signal, every public Wi-Fi access point became part of their monitoring system. Jennifer Martinez arrived with fresh evidence from the cybersecurity team. The AI algorithms they developed weren't just gathering data, they were actively shaping community behavior. They could predict resistance before it formed, identify potential troublemakers, even manipulate local social networks to isolate vocal opponents. Dr. Emily Chen analyzed neurological scans from residents of affected communities. The data showed distinct patterns of stress response and behavioral modification. The technology wasn't just watching people, she noted, it was conditioning them to accept increasingly restrictive controls. Agent Rodriguez decoded encrypted files, revealing the true extent of digital manipulation. Community enhancement partners had created a virtual web of control, using everything from social media algorithms to smart home systems to maintain their influence over target neighborhoods. Tom Bennett coordinated with state cybercrime units, uncovering links between seemingly innocent technology upgrades and corporate surveillance initiatives. Every infrastructure improvement project included hidden monitoring capabilities. They weren't just building better communities, they were building better control systems. Linda Chen discovered patterns in the deployment of surveillance technology that corresponded with increases in HOA enforcement actions. The correlations suggested a coordinated system of monitoring and response designed to maintain corporate control. In the mobile command unit, specialists analyzed quantum-encrypted communications between network operatives. The messages revealed a sophisticated system of real-time community monitoring and behavioral modification. Patricia Turner organized residents to document instances of technological interference in daily life. Smart thermostats that mysteriously malfunctioned during protests, security systems that activated without cause, traffic signals that created artificial congestion around community meetings. James Peterson provided details about the development of community control systems. We had teams of engineers working around the clock, developing new ways to monitor and influence resident behavior. The goal was total awareness and complete control. The FBI's advanced cybersecurity team traced digital footprints through layers of encryption, revealing how community enhancement partners had woven a sophisticated web of surveillance throughout target neighborhoods. Every smart device, every digital service, every online interaction had been monitored and analyzed. Dr. Emily Chen worked with neurological specialists to understand the impact of constant technological surveillance on community psychology. Brain scans showed elevated stress patterns consistent with living under persistent observation. Jennifer Martinez coordinated with international technology experts, mapping the global spread of corporate control systems. The evidence suggested that surveillance methods tested in one community were quickly adapted and deployed in others. Agent Rodriguez decoded communications, revealing how the network had developed predictive algorithms to identify potential resistance. Social media analysis, purchasing patterns, even energy usage data was fed into AI systems designed to maintain control. Tom Bennett arrived with reports from the state's digital forensics lab. Their technology wasn't just passive observation, he explained. They could actively manipulate community systems, traffic lights, security cameras, public Wi-Fi to isolate and pressure specific residents. Linda Chen discovered patterns in system deployment that showed how corporate control evolved. Each new technology introduced to the community included hidden monitoring capabilities, building an ever more comprehensive surveillance network. Mark watched as specialized equipment detected countless wireless signals emanating from ordinary-looking neighborhood fixtures. Street lamps, traffic signs, even park benches had been equipped with monitoring devices. James Peterson continued revealing technical details of the operation. The goal was ambient surveillance, monitoring so pervasive that residents would never know when they were being watched. It created a constant state of uncertainty and compliance. Patricia Turner organized residents to document technological anomalies, smart home systems that malfunctioned during community meetings, security cameras that seemed to track specific individuals, internet services that slowed when accessing certain websites. The FBI's quantum computing division processed vast amounts of data recovered from corporate servers, revealing the true scope of digital manipulation. Artificial intelligence had been used to analyze and influence every aspect of community life. Dr. Chen studied psychological profiles of residents living under technological surveillance. The constant monitoring created a form of learned helplessness, she observed. People began to self-censor to avoid any behavior that might draw attention. Jennifer Martinez worked with cybersecurity experts to understand how community systems had been compromised. The network had exploited vulnerabilities in everything from home automation to municipal infrastructure. Michael Drake's analysis revealed sophisticated financial algorithms designed to predict and manipulate property values. The system could create artificial market conditions that pressured residents to sell, while hiding its manipulation from regulatory oversight. Agent Collins reviewed holographic displays showing the evolution of surveillance technology in target communities. What began as simple security cameras had grown into a comprehensive system of community control. Linda Chen uncovered evidence of experimental technologies being tested in various neighborhoods. Each community served as a laboratory for developing new methods of digital manipulation and behavioral control. Tom Bennett coordinated with municipal authorities to document infrastructure compromises. Traffic systems, utility networks, and public services had all been weaponized against resident interests. The command center processed real-time data from quantum sensors deployed throughout affected communities. Each device measured different aspects of technological control, building a comprehensive picture of corporate surveillance. James Peterson provided insights into the development of control systems. "We created an invisible cage," he admitted. Technology that seemed to make life more convenient while actually restricting freedom of choice and action. Patricia Turner worked with residents to map patterns of technological interference. Community meetings faced mysterious technical difficulties. Protest organizers experienced service disruptions. Vocal critics found their digital lives increasingly challenging. Dr. Chen analyzed biometric data, showing how residents adapted to constant surveillance. Stress responses, sleep patterns, and social interactions all showed impacts from living under persistent monitoring. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with international technology experts to track the deployment of new control systems. Each community targeted by the network showed similar patterns of technological infiltration. Jennifer Martinez prepared legal frameworks addressing unprecedented forms of digital control. The evidence suggested a need for new regulations governing community surveillance and technological manipulation. Mark's living room continued evolving as a high-tech command center, with advanced systems processing data from worldwide investigations. Each screen revealed new aspects of corporate technological control. Linda Chen discovered how seemingly benign community improvements had enabled surveillance. Smart city initiatives, sustainability programs, and infrastructure upgrades all contained hidden monitoring capabilities. Tom Bennett worked with state officials to understand how corporate technology had influenced local governance. Decision-making systems, voting procedures, and administrative processes had all been compromised. Dr. Chen studied the neurological impact of living under technological surveillance. Brain scans revealed changes in stress response and decision-making, patterns among affected residents. Agent Collins reviewed evidence of technological manipulation in community events. Corporate systems had been used to disrupt gatherings, monitor discussions, and identify potential resistance leaders. The investigation revealed how community enhancement partners had created a technological ecosystem designed to monitor and control every aspect of community life. From smart home devices to municipal infrastructure, nothing had escaped corporate influence. As evening approached, Agent Collins received updates from quantum computing teams worldwide. Each report revealed new aspects of technological control, building a picture of unprecedented corporate surveillance. The setting sun cast shadows through holographic displays as international teams continued analyzing corporate control systems. The evidence suggested a level of technological sophistication that exceeded initial estimates. Mark stood in his driveway, watching specialized equipment detect and map the invisible web of surveillance that had been woven through his neighborhood. The technology that promised to make community life better had been turned into tools of control. The investigation continued, uncovering new layers of technological manipulation, each discovery revealing how deeply corporate surveillance had embedded itself in modern urban life. As darkness fell, Agent Collins reviewed the day's technological discoveries with her team. The evidence suggested that Catherine's operation had been a testing ground for advanced methods of community control, using technology to maintain power and influence. The lights of quantum computers burned late into the night as investigators processed vast amounts of data, revealing the full scope of technological manipulation in communities worldwide. The investigation had revealed a disturbing truth about modern society, that the very technologies designed to improve community life could be weaponized for corporate control, requiring constant vigilance and adaptation from residents and authorities alike. The morning sun cast long shadows across the temporary FBI outpost in Oakwood Estates as Special Agent Sarah Collins reviewed overnight findings from the task force's AI Analysis Division. The algorithm detected something unusual, she announced, gesturing to a complex data visualization. There's a recurring signature in Catherine's financial transactions, a mathematical pattern that appears to be some kind of verification code. Michael Drake leaned forward, studying the intricate web of numbers flowing across his screen. These aren't random fluctuations, he observed. The transactions themselves carry encrypted messages. She wasn't just moving money, she was communicating with someone. Jennifer Martinez burst through the door, clutching a stack of newly decrypted documents. We found references to something called Project Harmony in Catherine's private communications. It appears to be some kind of master plan for community transformation. Inside the mobile command unit, crypt analysts worked tirelessly to decode the hidden messages embedded within years of seemingly routine HOA transactions. Each decoded fragment revealed new layers of complexity in the organization's methods. The financial algorithms weren't just for profit, Dr. Emily Chen explained, studying behavioral patterns in the data. They were gathering psychological profiles of entire communities, identifying pressure points and resistance thresholds. Agent Rodriguez processed new information from undercover operatives who had infiltrated similar operations in other states. We're seeing coordinated actions across multiple communities. When resistance appears in one location, they adjust their strategies in all others simultaneously. Tom Bennett arrived with concerning news from state investigators. We've uncovered a training facility disguised as a corporate retreat center. They're not just sharing techniques, they're systematically replicating successful control methods. Linda Chen cross-referenced surveillance footage from dozens of communities, revealing patterns in how corporate operatives established initial contact. They start with small infractions, building detailed profiles of how each resident responds to authority. Mark watched from his porch as specialized equipment detected unique electromagnetic signatures emanating from seemingly ordinary HOA office equipment. Each device appeared to be part of a larger network designed for surveillance and control, James Peterson provided crucial details about the organization's methodology. Every violation notice, every fine, every interaction was catalogued and analyzed. They built a comprehensive database of community response patterns. The FBI's quantum computing division processed vast amounts of data, revealing correlations between enforcement actions and community behavior changes. The pattern suggested a sophisticated system of social engineering. Dr. Chen studied psychological profiles generated by the organization's AI systems. They weren't just predicting resistance, they were actively shaping community dynamics to prevent it from forming. Jennifer Martinez worked with cybersecurity experts to understand the full scope of digital manipulation. The HOA management software wasn't just tracking violations, it was running complex simulations of community behavior. As the investigation deepened, evidence emerged of a vast network of interconnected systems designed to monitor and influence community life at every level. From smart meters to security cameras, every piece of technology served multiple purposes. Agent Collins reviewed holographic displays showing the evolution of control methods across different communities. Each location served as a testing ground for new techniques that would be refined and deployed elsewhere. Inside the FBI's mobile command center, Michael Drake's fingers flew across multiple keyboards as he decoded another layer of Project Harmony's encrypted communications. The patterns revealed a sophisticated network of artificial intelligence systems working in concert to reshape entire communities. Each piece of data tells a story, Drake explained, gesturing to the cascading numbers on his screens. Property, values, energy usage, internet traffic, everything was monitored and fed into predictive models. They could anticipate resistance before residents even realized they were being manipulated. Jennifer Martinez spread newly decrypted documents across the conference table. Project Harmony's scope exceeded their worst fears. It wasn't just about controlling individual communities, it was a blueprint for transforming suburban life across the country. Dr. Emily Chen studied neural mapping data collected from residents in affected neighborhoods. The psychological conditioning was subtle but effective. Small changes in community rules, selective enforcement, strategic approval of some violations while punishing others. It all served to create a state of learned helplessness. Agent Rodriguez coordinated with field teams investigating similar operations nationwide. Each discovery revealed new aspects of Project Harmony's methodology. The organization had created a scalable system for community takeover that could be deployed anywhere. Tom Bennett arrived with concerning reports from state authorities. Training facilities disguised as corporate retreats were teaching operatives how to implement Project Harmony's methods. The program was designed to expand exponentially. Linda Chen analyzed surveillance footage showing how Project Harmony operatives infiltrated target communities. They began with legitimate concerns: property values, safety issues, infrastructure improvements, before gradually implementing more restrictive controls. Mark's living room had become a hub for investigating. Project Harmony's technological infrastructure, specialized equipment detected hidden networks of sensors and monitoring devices throughout the neighborhood. Every streetlight, security camera, and smart meter served dual purposes. James Peterson revealed more details about the program's development. Project Harmony wasn't just about making money. It was about creating a new model of community governance, one that could be centrally controlled while maintaining the appearance of local autonomy. The FBI's quantum computing division processed terabytes of data recovered from Project Harmony's servers. Artificial intelligence systems had been used to create detailed profiles of every resident, predicting how they would react to various forms of pressure. Dr. Chen studied psychological assessments generated by Project Harmony's AI.